Hey guys, welcome back to SUP'S Garage. On this video, I'm going to show you how to remove your front fairing on your 2008 to 2016 R6. Now, as you see, I already got the side fairings already removed on this bike, but that's okay. You click here on the right top side of the screen. It's going to show you how to remove both fairings on this exact same bike, and then you can come back to this video and show you how to remove the rest. Obviously, the reason why I'm moving this front piece is because the upper stay is broken, so we're going to have to get that replaced, and possibly the plastic trim here. So, let's get started. All right, guys. So we're gonna start on the right side of the bike because we've got to disconnect the wiring harness that's heading towards the headlight, that's connected to relays, the speedometer, and some other stuff. And in order to do that, we got to disconnect this white one here, this black one here, and this one here on the bottom. All right, so we're gonna start off with this black one on top, and this one just has a tab on the back. You're just gonna push that tab on the back and pull this side out like so. Now you notice this is still attached to the bike. It's pretty simple how to remove this. You're gonna rotate towards you, pull up, and it comes right out. Next one is we got this white one here. It's got a different tab, and you're simply just gonna push down on that tab and then pull out like so. And then lastly, you got this one, which is probably gonna be the hardest out of all three, but it shouldn't be too bad. You're just gonna push this tab down, and for this one, I like to wiggle sideways a little bit and then pull out, make it a little easier. All right, that's pretty much it as far as disconnecting everything that goes to the front. Now we just simply have to disconnect the 4 bolts that are holding down the upper stay and basically the entire front end. And to get access for that, you're gonna have to rotate the wheel depending on what side you're working on first. I'm gonna be working on the right side first, so we're gonna turn the wheel to the right, so we can get access to these 2 bolts that we got to remove, and then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. All right, so we got the right side taken care of. Now it's time to move on to the left side. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have to turn the wheel the opposite way. Now we have access to those bolts. And here's a little tip, guys. Sometimes when taking these off, they're gonna be torqued down pretty good, and these bolts kind of strip easily. So to avoid stripping any of these bolts, you wanna grab your extension and the Allen key you're gonna use to take those bolts off, and just tap it down with the hammer a couple times. Same thing with the bottom. And that's gonna reduce the chances of it stripping out on you once you start removing it. And as you saw on the other side, I used the power tool. I actually loosened it first by hand, and then use the power tool just to prevent from stripping those bolts. Now do keep in mind, once you remove the last bolt, this entire front end is just gonna fall down. So just make sure you have one hand on the front while you loosen that last bolt, so you can safely remove the front end. All right, now that we got all 4 bolts moved, we are now ready to remove the entire front end. And you're just gonna wiggle left and right a little bit, and the entire front end will come off. All right, so it's time to start taking all this apart. I didn't take these part of the fairings off at the beginning, but that's okay. It's just gonna be these 2 tabs here that you're gonna have to use a screwdriver for to unloosen, and then you can pull out. In my case, I've already used the screwdriver to unloosen it. I'm just pulling it out at this point. And once you've done that, these should just come right out. Okay, now we can get started on actually removing the upper stay. And the upper stay is not hard to remove at all. We're gonna start off with removing the mirror bolts. Now obviously I'm missing my right side, so I don't have to worry about that side at all. But you're just gonna take off the 2 bolts on both mirrors to start off with. All right, and once you take off those bolts, you can simply just pull off on the mirror. And now we can focus back on the upper stay. Now obviously your upper stay is not gonna look like this. It's still gonna be attached to your headlight, but keep in mind this one's broken. So if yours wasn't this way, you will have a total of 4 bolts, 2 on each side, to remove the upper stay from the headlight. You got one here on top, you got one here on the bottom. You would have another one here on the bottom on the right side, and the other one would have been located here on the top side on the right. But again, this upper stay is broken. So in my case, all I have to remove is this one here, because they all broke off from the headlight. And for that, you're just gonna need a screwdriver to remove those, and they should be pretty easy on removing. Now just be sure when you're working on the last screw, just like we did earlier, hold on your upper stay for it doesn't drop on you. And once we get that removed, the upper stay is gonna be pretty loose at this point. But one thing I forgot to mention is it's gonna have these tabs right underneath the mirror bolts on both sides. And it's just gonna be a plastic tab. Same thing, just like on the bottom of the fairings. It's gonna use a crosshead. We're gonna unloosen it. Once you got it loosened up, you're just gonna pull out. And then the entire upper stay should be off, but you still have the electrical connected on the speedometer. For that one, it's gonna be pretty easy. It's just gonna have this boot cover here. We're just gonna remove it, put it on the side as much as possible. And you can't see it on camera, but there's a tab on the bottom. you're just gonna push down on that tab. Now again, I like to wiggle left and right to make it easier for me. So I'm just gonna push down on that tab, wiggle left and right, and pull back. Now to replace the upper stay, we're gonna have to remove the speedometer to put the speedometer on the new upper stay. And all you have to do that is just remove these three. Just use a cross screwdriver like we've been using. And just like we've been doing before on that last one, just hold your speedometer where it just doesn't fall down on you, cause any scratches. You're just gonna gently pull out slowly because it's just held by plastic tabs at this point. And there we have it. We got our speedometer completely off. We're just gonna put this on the side. All right, now to continue taking apart the headlight unit, we got these two sensors here that we're gonna disconnect from this plastic piece. All you're gonna do is push down on the tab and pull back. Do the same thing for this black tab over here. You're gonna push down on the tab and pull back. And this is completely removed. All right, to remove the headlight from the front fairing piece itself, we got a total of 7 screws we gotta remove. We got 1 here, 2, and you can't really see this one here on the bottom, but there's 1 tucked in there. It's the exact same thing on the other side. You're gonna have this one here, that's also broken on mine, and then the one on the very bottom as well, just like the other side. And then you're gonna have this center one here, and then we should be able to remove the headlight. And again, we're just gonna be using the same screwdriver we've been using. Doesn't really matter what side you start off on. Now these bottom ones might be a little tricky, but you are able to get them. And now we got the last one that's gonna be sitting right here in the center. All right, so once you got all 7 of those screws off, you should be able to completely remove the headlight from the fairing itself. And now we have the 2 pieces separated from each other. All right, so now we got to take off the wiring harness off the old headlight, because as you can see on the right, I got the new headlight there waiting. And we're gonna have to put the old harness on the new one. So in order to disconnect this wire harness, it's not hard. You're gonna have 2 relays on each side, and they're gonna be connected with the rubber piece. And all you gotta do is pull those out slowly, and it comes right off. Same thing on the other side. You're just gonna pull this one back, and it comes off. And all we have to take off now are gonna be 2 screws on each side that's holding the wire harness down to the headlight. And we're just also gonna be disconnecting these blue connectors. You're gonna have 1 also on each side. And for these, they're pretty simple. You're just gonna push down on the tab and pull out. And we're gonna go ahead and take care of the other side as well. You're just gonna push in the tab and pull off. All right, now the last thing is the 2 screws on each side. And there we have it. We got the old headlights going in the trash, and then we're gonna go ahead and reinstall the harness on the new headlight. All right, now it's time to put everything back together in reverse steps. We got our headlight, we got our new upper stay that we're gonna install here in a minute. So as far as the harness, we're gonna go ahead and put our screws on first, the ones we just removed. All right, just ignore what's on the bottom. I just put it there for it could be easier and I don't have to hold it at the same time. All right, now we're gonna connect our blue clips back on. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and connect our relays back onto the headlight. And again, it's just gonna slide back on these tabs here. We're gonna start on the left side. Just gonna put it in, slide all the way back. Just like that. And same thing goes for the right side. Now it's time to move on putting the plastics back on the headlight. So for now, I'm gonna be putting the old one back on, only because this bike is coming back later to replace all the fairings. All right, so the first thing we wanna do is just slide this piece back in there. Like so. But we're gonna be putting the screws back on that we removed earlier on the video. The ones on the side here, the one in the center, and same thing on the other side. I'm gonna start off on my left side. I'm gonna do the bottom ones last, only because they're a little harder to get to. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the center one and move on to the other 2 on top on the right. All right, so at this point, we got the plastic fully on the new headlight. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the windscreen, which is only held down at this point by 3 screws, obviously because it's broken. And then we're gonna be putting on the upper stay. Okay, we got that out of the way. Now moving back to the upper stay, we're gonna need this piece here first. And remember, with the 2 sensors we connected earlier, we gotta reconnect those before we put all this back in place, which is gonna be the blue connector and the black connector. And it's pretty obvious which one goes where, because the 2 connections cannot be mismatched. They're both different sizes. So just reconnect those. like so. Now once you have these two connections connected, just be sure that you do have the rubber piece that goes in the front that actually sits into the headlight. We're gonna leave that like that for now. We're gonna come to the new upper stay here, and just be sure you remove the rubber piece that sits right here from the old upper stay to put it on the new one, which is this one right here from the old upper stay. You're just gonna pull back and it comes off pretty easy, and it just sits just like this, so there's not much to it. Okay, so now what we gotta do next is remove all the rubber pieces on the old upper stay, as you can see here, and put them on the new one, and they come out pretty easy. Just gonna bend from one side, push inward, and pull the rest from the back, just like that. Okay, so once you have all the rubber pieces on, we're gonna go ahead and put on the speedometer back on, which is gonna be pretty easy. You just slide this in here, back into the 3 holes, like so, and then go ahead and put your screws back on there. But just be careful you don't over tighten those, because they will break the tabs. All right, now that we got all 3 screws in, we're gonna go ahead and flip it over. Now at this point, this is ready to reinstall back onto the headlight. First thing we wanna do before we forget is go ahead and connect the connection that goes to the speedometer. Easiest way to do this is pull back on this boot. Make sure you have a good grip of the connection itself, and then just connect it back onto the speedometer. And just be sure you cover it back up with the boot. You wanna go ahead and install this piece onto the upper stay here. As you can see, there's a hole here. That's where this tab, and it has one on each side, needs to be put in. Just like that. And now we can go ahead and install this whole piece onto the headlight. Now I'm gonna hold it for now because this piece is just gonna fall right out. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting the 4 screws that I need to put on that holds the upper stay onto the headlight. All right, now that I got all the screws back on the headlight itself, now I can go ahead and focus back on the windscreen, which I'm gonna go ahead and put on next. All right, so when putting your windscreen, just make sure you have these 4 pieces that the bolt screws onto to hold down the windscreen. We got our new windscreen here, and it has a little bit of lip on both sides. It actually goes tucked in under the black pieces on both sides. So you're just gonna push it down flat as much as possible. Make sure that piece is underneath, and then just push down all the way. And once you've done that, go ahead and put on the 4 bolts. All right, got my bolt here, and I'm gonna add a little plastic washer so it doesn't scratch up the windscreen once I'm tightening it up. You shouldn't have to tighten these too tight, just enough where you start feeling it tension, turning it by hand, and that is it. I'm gonna do 1 on each side first, just in case it gets too tight on this side and I'm not gonna be able to line it up on the right. And I'm gonna leave these 2 loose for now because there's a rubber piece on the mirror that I'm gonna have to install. So I'll probably end up tightening these last 2 bolts last. And this is the rubber piece that goes on both sides on the mirrors that I'm gonna go ahead and put on now so I can fully tighten those last 2 bolts. This piece here is gonna go in this way. The notch has to go towards the windscreen into the center hole here, as you can see. And you can see here it has a little lip on it. The windscreen actually sits right in it. So it should look just like this once it's fully installed. Do the exact same thing on the right side. Okay, so once both sides are taken care of, we can go ahead and put our mirrors back on. All right, so once you got that, don't forget to retighten those 2 top bolts that we left loosened on the windscreen on top. And I do want to mention there is a clip that goes in here on both sides. I'm not going to be putting that back on because I only have 1 of the clips, and plus this piece is not going to go anywhere anyway. But I do want to mention that just in case you want to reinstall your clip on your bike. And now we're ready to go ahead and put our front end piece back on. Don't forget to install this on the upper stay, because remember this one sits between the frame and the upper stay itself. So go ahead and make sure that's on your upper stay before reinstalling it. All right, now we're just going to slide the piece back on. Just make sure you have a good firm grab on your headlight, because it is a little heavy and you're gonna have to use 1 hand to hold it and the other hand to screw the screws back on. I'm gonna go ahead and start by hand tightening them first. Now that I got those hand tight, I can go ahead and leave the headlight alone, but I'm gonna go ahead and put on the other side as well. Do the same thing, do hand tight, because you wanna make sure all of them can go in before you actually tighten them all up. Okay, so I already put them on by hand on both sides. So what I like to do before starting to tighten everything down is just pull up on the headlight and then go ahead and tighten everything up. All right, now we're gonna tighten the right side. And lastly, we're gonna reconnect all our wires that we disconnected
from the headlight back onto the bike. And it doesn't really matter which one you start off with first. In my case, I'm just gonna start off with this one here. You're just gonna push this back in, make sure it clips. Do this white one here next. And then finally, the black one. But before you do the black one, you wanna make sure that you put it back on this plastic piece first. And remember, you're gonna tilt this your way, push down, then turn, and it's back on the bike. Finally, we're just gonna clip it back in. And that's it. All right, guys, and that's gonna be it on this video. I know it still looks ugly as far as the plastics go, but again, this bike will be coming back to get a whole new look. I just didn't want this bike sitting here while we're waiting on the plastics. But at least at this point, this front end is not going anywhere. So the rider will be able to ride this meanwhile we wait for those plastics. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do so. I would really appreciate the support. And of course, if you enjoy watching videos like this that help you out, smash that like button for me. But like always, God bless you guys, and we'll see y'all on the next video.